The difference for me between horror and thriller, there's a couple of differences, but there's two that stand out to me, which is first, its tone, because again, the level of scares and whatnot that you decide to dial up or dial down could take things and make them quite horrifying and help you bring the blood, bring the guts, bring the scares, but it's all placed in the identical spot. So in a thriller, what would be like a boo scare, in a horror movie would be a kill. But when you get into that, there's also sort of like the supernatural version of horror versus the straight-up guy with a knife version of horror. And those work a little bit differently because you have to have the great mythology that justifies why there's a supernatural presence, why there's a ghost in the house, why the vampire is haunting you, versus if you just have the guy with the knife, there's usually like, oh, he escaped from an insane asylum. That's all the backstory you get. So you also have to account for how much backstory and how much information you need to justify the mythology, which also affects how everything ends, because you don't want to have the Scooby-Doo ending when they have to explain the whole mythology. So the favorite thing that we always cite is the movie Poltergeist, where it's all crazy, the whole movie's nuts, but at the very end it's as simple as they moved the headstones, but not the bodies. And you're done. That's all you need. That's the mythology. Explains everything. So we keep that in mind when we're looking at how to build a smart horror movie out of a thriller. But this sounds weird. You know how like when you're in geometry class in grammar school and they say like all rectangles are squares, but not all squares are rectangles. Essentially, all horror movies are thrillers, but not all thrillers are horror movies. But you need to follow all the math of a thriller in order to have a successful horror movie. And then if you want to make it supernatural horror, you need to add that in as your overlay because of that mythology versus just a dude with a knife who might as well be the corporation coming after you. Same thing. The only movies that really, really earn the title of horror must be supernatural. Other than that, for us, a guy with a knife is always a thriller. So for us, a true horror movie always has mythology and always has supernatural elements to it, and here's why. The reason that for us they elevate from thriller to horror is that this goes beyond sociopath. Now we're talking about supernatural. There are no rules. There's nothing we as an audience can anticipate because we don't know what the F we're dealing with. So that makes us even more scared than anything you can get from a sociopath who's actually kind of laid out what they're going to do and what they're going to do for you and how they're going to do it to you and they're going to pull out your toenails and all that. No, we're dealing with like crazy ghosts, evil werewolves, vampires, whatever the case is. So to us, that is that much more horrifying, and that's the really fun part. For a psychological thriller, which is obviously a big one and a fun one to do, and you can do it on any kind of budget you want, it's a battle of wits. So the protagonist must use their head to get to the bottom of things. Very elegant plotting because of the chess game. And within that, there's two kinds. So there's the am I crazy, I think I'm going nuts version of a psychological thriller, and there's the oh, no, I'm not crazy. Yeah, I just need to prove it to you guys. So, there's the ones where people are continually doubting themselves, like in Black Swan, or in Vertigo, or The Others, or Donnie Darko, where they're literally like at every turn thinking something's wrong. Like, I think I'm crazy. Like, I don't even trust myself anymore. And that can happen from within, or it can happen because the antagonist is doing such an amazing job messing with their head. So that's different than the person having no doubt. They do not feel like they're crazy in the least, but they just are having trouble getting somebody to believe whatever they have seen and whatever they have going on. So other people think they're crazy, but they know they're not. They're never doubting it for 1 second. They have very sure footing. So for me, the difference is the, oh my God, I think I'm going crazy, unsure footing, versus I am not crazy, but I've got to prove it to you. I have very firm footing. All I'm trying to do is get loud enough that you hear me and believe me, and you can help me stop this. Political thrillers are highly, highly procedural because they've got to get to that nugget of who's corrupt and who they need to stop and how they can stop them. So for me, it's one step off of the whodunit, whydunit sort of procedural detective movie. And then knowing what kind of politics they're up against, then that sort of determines exactly what kind of game you're in, whether it's a Jason Bourne type, sort of like-minded, I just have to channel everything I hate about myself in order to get to the bottom of it, versus Syriana, which is understanding an entirely different system.